All right, guys, so we're about to get into a podcast with Justin Lamb, young entrepreneur, doing really well, changing the game right now, giving him his water. So we're going to be in there, going to connect with him and just kind of share with you guys the things that he's doing to help you inspire and go after what you want. So excited for that, and thank you for watching. Okay, everybody, thank you for watching. I want to introduce you guys to a young entrepreneur who's living life on his own terms. He skipped 2 years of high school. He's got clients. He makes chatbots. He's actually been to one of my mentors' house, Iman Gadzhi's house, and he was a student there. And he basically had a very unique experience to where he, acquired his first client, and things just began to domino since there. So now he's got students. He's got his own personal brand. He's connecting with high-level people. And coincidentally, he lives quite close to where our office is, and I figured, I might as well reach out, connect with him, introduce him to the team, and just kind of share with him what we're doing, introduce him to my mentors, and most importantly, share what he's doing and hopefully inspire you guys to take some sort of action in your life just by learning what he's doing and hearing the true story about somebody that was just a normal kid, just like me, just like all the other people that do it, that switched their focus from something that was maybe unimportant to something that was important, and was able to really experience an amazing, now he's got so much on his plate. So don't want to steal all that from him. I want to introduce you guys. This is Justin, and tell us. So you got your first client, but it really, when did this journey start? Because I know for me, you could look at when I got my first client, or you could look at, the first time that I got the paycheck, but there's moments that I don't think are shown on Instagram, on YouTube, that maybe you started reading, when you were 14, and maybe you started going to the gym, and maybe you started realizing you were in control of your life. And these are really those inception points that people forget about. So if you can recall, when was your first maybe moment, inception point, when you kind of had that realization of like, hey, I could get in shape and I could do this and I could, when did that moment kind of happen for you?
Yeah. So I think it all started with fitness, because I think I mentioned earlier in an earlier conversation that fitness was really the first catalyst in me realizing that, hey, like you said, I have complete and total control over my life. And so, my fitness journey just started with me watching YouTube. It was all YouTube videos back then, watching a few fitness influencers go through, their workout routines and diet plans and stuff like that. And I realized hey, I could transform my body. And so I got into that. I, invested everything I got into, fitness, bodybuilding it was at that time. And, it translated. Once I started seeing, me physically changing my body, I realized this could extend to all the other aspects of my life, and added on to the fact that, I started building up my personal brand a little bit. I think back then I had a few hundred followers, and so I would post progress photos, and eventually I started, getting a chance to actually network and DM, people my age who were actually doing similar things, right? Probably not all of them were in fitness. Some of them were in social media. Some of them were doing e-commerce and stuff like that. But then I realized hey, there's this legitimate movement of people 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and around that age group that are actually making a difference, right? And they're they're going out there, they're building businesses, they're making impact, they're changing lives. And I realized look, social media marketing space is something that I've been wanting to get into for a while. I must have seen, it must have been an ad or something like that when I first initially got exposed to it, and then I started talking to my my group of friends about it, and I realized that they were also starting businesses in that space. So I was like, you know what, I'll give it a try. And then around then was when I actually first met my first mentor, Eman. I, came through his Instagram and then came through his YouTube as well, I realized that he was actually, again, building a legitimate business in the social media marketing space. And that was when I decided to take the leap. I bought his course. It was my first course. It was a personal branding course. And then from there, I kind of dived into social media marketing, man, because like personal brand is like that little taste of social media marketing. But obviously, there's so much more on the back end of it. Like back then when I first started taking the course, I didn't realize I could help businesses. Right? I didn't realize I could go out and, for example, build chatbots and run Facebook ads and like go in and close meetings with like 34, 40, 50-year-olds. I had no idea that was possible. And so I guess it was fitness and then growing my personal brand, and that eventually translated into like the social media marketing business space.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of a similar theme, and that's something too, is that success leaves clues. Like anybody that's successful, look at all the people around them. They have mentors. They value their body. And I've seen that with my mentor, with myself. I would say mine really started with fitness as well. The moment that I started to see like, wow, when I put in effort, when I eat right, when I do these different things, my body changes in the same way that it could happen negatively too. When you don't do stuff, when you stop working out, your muscles get soft, And so I think what happened is you had that experience with fitness, and then because you were kind of already opened up to like you already unlocked. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that once people are unlocked and they're given the thing to sell, the thing they can do, you start meeting with 40, 50-year-olds that when you have the first meeting and you start talking to them, you're like, dude, this person needs me. Yeah. Like I have something that this person needs, and he's going to pay me. Like, and you just feel it, So what was that like? I know you told me you did some trials. Maybe you could go through that and then like the first real client. And so what was your first, how'd you get that first trial client?
So trial client, it was just a Facebook message. Like I literally posted, I remember I posted in a Facebook group and I said, hey guys, like, I think I specifically said people in the real estate niche. I said, real estate professionals, like if you guys are looking to try out Facebook ads, I'm actually doing it completely free of charge. I can get your results within 2 weeks. All I ask is if I get you the results you want, just go ahead, put together a case study or testimonial for me. And that's all I ask. You cover ad spend, but you don't need to pay me anything. So that's how I got my first trial client. I realized that wasn't a sustainable way to go at it, just because obviously free trials, you have to stack free trial on top of free trial. And on top of that, there's the whole idea that, when people are giving something for free, they won't value it as much, and, therefore the results might not be as good as if it were a paid client, right? I realized that, and then, back then, like I said, there was a period of like 3 months initially when I didn't get that much traction going. I got free trial clients, but I never really got any sort of like big retainer client. And then I realized like, hey, at this point, I've done so many free trials that like I know this niche like the back of my hand. And so then, at that point, I was like, I got to stop doing free trials. I can offer my services like a paid service, and they would value it a lot more, and I know I can get them an ROI on it. And so, after that was when I first started like cold calling and stuff. I did various forms of outreach. But it was really only when I started like calling businesses did I actually get a lot of traction going and meetings set up and stuff like that. So
and that was through cold calling, just calling people. So how was that? Was that easy? Because I know some people, even me, I've gotten pretty. Yeah, I'll talk about that later. But how was cold calling people? Was that tough?
It was tough for me just because naturally I don't necessarily want to like say introverted to put myself in a box, but I do like to think things through. And so cold calling was a little tough for me to start off. I remember like I guess the little excuses that I would put in my mind were like, oh, I can always do like other forms of outreach. I don't have to call people. I can message people and stuff like that. But really I figured out like the most direct way to reach people, if you have a good script in place, if you are providing value and you're coming in to initiate a conversation and not sell people right away, cold calling does work. So, I realized that as soon as I realized it, I think at that period I did like 30 to 50 cold calls a day or something like that. And that's how I initially got started.
Yeah, cold calls, I mean, there's definitely other ways I'll talk about later for people that are interested and wanting to get started. But I think the point of a lot of these things, just anything in life, is like if you need to get results, like you got to go towards the thing that you're scared of. And most people think cold calls because, in my opinion, it's like they know that there could be that result on the other side of that call. But it's not as easy as like, oh, let me just send some text, and anybody could kind of
Hide
copy
behind my
paste
screen,
and just.
yeah.
But as soon as
Yeah.
you call and then it's a real person, people are confronted with how good they are. Do they really have
Objections.
some of value? The objections. That's like probably the biggest one. So you cold call, you started getting some meetings, and then eventually you got your first, like paid retainer client. Was that through cold call or was that through referral? And how did that happen?
Yeah. So the initial one was through cold call. I realized that it wasn't like, while it worked when I first started it, I realized it probably wasn't the most efficient way, because I started thinking about like, okay, what are these high level agencies doing? How are they able to be so successful without constantly having to directly call businesses? Do they have a funnel in place? Do they provide massive value up front? Do they utilize their existing network, personal brand, whatever it was? And I realized it wasn't sustainable for me as well, because like I'm a full-time student still, and I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I skipped 2 years ahead in school, so I have a pretty decent workload that I have to take care of, along with actually physically being in classes certain times of the day. So I realized I needed a more of a, not passive, but like a way that I could like prepare things beforehand so that I can get leads coming to me. And so I kind of moved away from cold calling. I use, the clients after that first one were mainly through my personal brand or through my business partner, so my extended network. Or the third way was I actually provided a lot more value up front. So I didn't cold call. I started moving into like warm calling. I would send an initial email first. That email would be completely jam-packed with value. And I made sure that the people who I was reaching out to were actually qualified, right? So I didn't, out of a list of 100 given prospects, I didn't reach out to every single one of them, because I realized like a lot of people either don't need my service, or they don't have a respect for my service, or they just simply can't afford it. They need a smaller solution, right? So I started narrowing down on the people I was reaching out to, and when I did that, everything just became 100 times more efficient. I no longer had to bang out cold calls for like 3 hours a day and stuff like that, and I was able to work around my schedule like that.
So there's a few things I wanted to touch on. Number one is he kind of, when you're starting, like it's all about, like, my opinion, and I want to hear yours, but if you're going to do any type of business or just go to the gym, whatever it is, my philosophy was like, let me just get the client and then I'll figure out like how to get the results.
Yeah.
And it seems like, what are you doing? But I think so many people are on that other end where like, let me get the results, let me figure this, and they spend all their time 3 months trying to get the results for practicing on themselves or free trial clients. But now that I'm looking back, and I think that's why people like you and me see value in providing a course, is because when you look back, if you transfer that energy of trying to get a free trial client, you could easily have invested that into getting somebody that'll pay you $1,500, $3,000, $5,000. So you definitely, when you're starting though, I don't want I think it's cool to have like people present, hey, if you actually set up a funnel and like do this and automate it, you can do it. But I do think there's some value in knowing that you've cold call and talk to people, because it's more embodied. It's like I've actually tried to like get business owners, and like I know what it's like to talk to people, because if you've never cold called and you've never talked to people and handled objections, and then you just have a clean, pretty little funnel, and then when you're on the phone, even though you're going to get people that know what you're talking about, you're still going to have to deal with it like it's a cold call, unless like you could tell off the bat, look, this person is ready, it's ripe, I need to ask the right questions, and then we're done. But that's not usually how it happens. You actually have to almost approach people that come into you as somebody that's cold, because if they for 1 second aren't connected to who you are in the first few seconds, it's cold. Even if you did a funnel, I've had people coming through my funnel and say, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, and I kind of rewind them. But if I hadn't done all these real cold calls, I wouldn't really know how to handle that. So I like that you've done that. I've done that. I still do that to some extent, just because I think that I like doing stuff that kind of scares me. There was a guy, I called him and, I kind of told him the price and just all this stuff. And he's like, dude, I'm not going to pay, $1,500 for this thing. Why would I do that when I have my own thing, blah, blah, blah. And so he called me, or he hung up, excuse me.
Yeah.
And I was like, the next day I'm like going through my leads and I'm calling him again. And I see his name and I'm like, dude, I'm not going to call this guy. Like, this guy hung up on me. And I'm like, this guy didn't like me. And I'm like, dude, that's the perfect person to call. And so I called him. He didn't answer. But that's what all this stuff is at bigger levels. It's like something you're scared of doing. You just got to do it. And once you start doing it, you get more comfortable being in meetings, talking to people. And then when you've said you charge $5,000 or $10,000 or $1,500, thousands of times, when somebody asks you what your price is, like $1,500, $5,000, $10,000, because you're like,
Yeah.
and then you realize that's not even a lot of money.
Yeah.
When you're like $1,500, dude, I scraped this off and it's like, oh man, that's not even really anything. So that's kind of my perception of that. So my next follow-up question was like, what would you like now that you know what you know? If you were starting out, where would you have done things differently? Like, where would your initial focus have been? What would that have?
Yeah, so for me, I would have probably focused, like you said, the 3 months that I didn't really get too much traction going, I would have focused most of my time and energy into either building my team or client acquisition, just because I know that as a business owner, like, one of my main functions is to actually move my business forward. And if I'm taking the role of just some, other digital marketer and I'm trying to like go through all this education and like hours and hours of watching courses and doing free trials and stuff like that, like, I'm not moving my business forward, right? The only time when my business is moving forward is when I actually, acquire a new client. That's what it's all about. So I would probably, again, like I said, I would focus most of my time into, getting meetings set up, actually going into the meetings, talking like a business owner, learning how these business owners like interact with each other, the terminology they use, like how they like to talk, like how they like to be understood. And on the other side of things, like just building an excellent team. Because I know that, even if I would have done that early on, I would have a ton of people that would have been qualified to, do the services instead of me having to put like hours and hours a week trying to fulfill the services myself, right?
Yeah.
I think it's much wiser. And for me, I have a little bit of difficulty with this as well because I know, with my personality, I'm very, very like lone wolf sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't operate in a team as well as some other people would. So it's something that I actively try to work on. But I know that, if I just look through my network, if I just look through my social media, my personal brand, I would find like tons of people who knew how to run amazing Facebook ads much better than I could do, right? I would know a ton of people who are a lot better at branding, like graphic design, like posting for clients, growing their social media than I like a better job than I could do, right? So the wiser decision for me would have been assemble the entire team together and then just have myself focus on the client acquisition.
Yeah. And I think that because I would say the same thing. I mean, my story is a little different and I want to just stay focused on yours. But what he's saying too is powerful because once he realized like, okay, if I'm not bringing in money, like, yeah, the other stuff may seem fun. It may be rewarding to feel like I'm doing it myself, but you do get to a point when like you look at the bank account and then you think about, man, I spent, hours setting up these ads and I spent hours doing this. So I feel like everybody kind of goes through that little thing of like, dude, I can't let off, the control. I need to know what's going on. And so a lot of it's about actually letting go when you start is like, okay, let me just work on the business. Let me see, okay, this guy's already good at ads. And then you really do become a true business owner because when you're setting up the stuff, when you're doing it yourself, there's value in knowing how to do it and what to look for. But the people that do the really well, like E-Man, I mean, he's not in there. Maybe he writes the copy and kind of creates the strategy, but I know, he's not in there
Right.
deep, troubleshooting and the reason he's just able to bring in those numbers is because he's focused on like that one thing. So that's cool. That I would say that's similar to what I would do, because I was doing the ads and the lead gen, and even now still I'm like doing some ads, and I'm like, dude, when I focus on bringing in clients, like I bring them in, So
I think it's ego as well, because
yeah,
realizing like you're letting go, like, hey, these people have 3 to 5 years of experience on me. They have tens of thousands of dollars of ad spend experience on me. Like, I gotta trust them to be able to deliver, and the fact that like you gotta humble yourself, because obviously you're paying them a cut of the retainer, right? But you obviously know that long term it's gonna help you do a lot better because you're putting your energy and time into the client acquisition.
yeah, and it just makes me feel relieved thinking about that. Like, oh, I just get the client, and then like somebody does it.
Done.
Somebody does it,
Yeah.
And so, and then what's cool too is that you're supporting that person's gift,
Yeah.
which is not, hey, I want to go out and call people and do this. So I think a lot of times people often have a misconception of like, when you hire people to do your laundry, to clean for you, and like do these things, like I've like my food, all that, like I don't do that because I just like I'm supporting other people's gift. That's like, oh, I love like cleaning, and like some people love cleaning, some people love doing Facebook ads, strategizing, troubleshooting, but when you start trying to handle all of it, you can't move. So do you watch, like, who do you watch? Who are your mentors? I know E-Man. Who else do you watch? Who do you listen to?
So, in regards to like podcasts and stuff like that, or just people I follow, I feel like, for me, I know a lot of people have a different opinion on this, but for me, I feel like, I personally have those core like 2-3 mentors that I really, really, really focus on, because I know
That's
that
sick.
there's information overload, like once you start listening to like, Gary Vee on one end, then you have like Tony Robbins on the other, then you have like some health and spiritual coach that you also listen to. It's like, again, like I said, information overload. Like, you can only process so many people's way of doing things at one time, and it gets to the point where like you're gonna have like conflicts in the way that they view the world and stuff like that. So if you're gonna find like mentors and you're gonna model your success in your business off of them, I feel like really you should only have 1 or 2 people that you really, really focus on and that you strive to to be like, right? So for me,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, so for me, like I said, like Eman was my first mentor. He's still a really, really big mentor for me. And I do listen to like a few other like podcasts and stuff like that, but I don't consider that like, my dominant like influence.
You're real, yeah.
I just take it into consideration, so to speak.
Okay. And so E-Man, and then do you have like people that are mentors, or do you have like virtual, like is it Sam Oven?
Right.
Who are those
Right.
people? Or
Right. So I have, I think I mentioned earlier, I have a business partner.
Okay.
He runs an agency out in Torrance. So, he's not really as much of a mentor to me, but more like, a strategic partner. Like, we bounce ideas off of each other all the time, and I find value in that.
Yeah.
Right? So I would say those 2 people are probably some of the biggest influences for
So
me.
you keep it pretty just boom, and then inside of that you're just going deep, like just just tell me more. What's the next step? What's the next step? You're not like, which is more me. I'm like, oh, I can pull from this end. I could pull from there. I could do spirituality.
I think there's value in that. I think that definitely does not mean, I'm not saying that you should shut out everything else. Yeah, I'm just saying that there are your main influences, and then there are things you kind of take into consideration. Like, for example, one of my favorite books, like The Way of the Superior Man by this guy named David Data. Like, I listen to his spiritual teachings, right? Like, I listen to all of that. I listen to some of Tony Robbins' advice, but I don't make that like the main thing I follow. Again, just because there is conflict between different people.
Between like a Sam Ovens and a Gary Vee.
Yeah,
You
and
got
like
like
Ty Lopez and
you got like a, yeah, exactly. So that's cool. You found, and so do you just kind of transfer, like, do you, although there's not that many people, let's say 2 or 3, are you constantly filling your mind with those 2 or 3 people, or are you more like, okay, these are my 2, 3 people. When I need it, I'm gonna go to them,
Yeah.
and I just do more than I actually like. Do you take in a lot?
Yeah,
or-
yeah. So I do take in quite a bit, but it's more like I like to like go out and test the concepts on my own, right? So I like to kind of like learn from experience, and then I go to them for advice on specific issues. So I don't ask them to give me an entire blueprint.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
obviously, and they expect me to do the work as
Yeah.
well, right? And so yeah, for me, it's this constant process of like trial and error, basically. But obviously, when you have a mentor there, he can show you the path faster than if you were just on your own. So that's the main function of mentors in my case. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta have somebody that just, yeah. If you don't, it's just, every great person has had, like, there's nobody that doesn't. They're not like, oh, I just kind of figured it out. Everybody was led or in some way influenced, So,
Right.
I want to go back to something. You're a full-time student, right?
Yeah.
And that's in college?
Yeah. So I skipped 2 years ahead. I should be a high school senior, but I'm second year in college.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're going to college for the people that are in college that are, that's interesting because here you got a business.
Yeah.
Is that influenced by the parents? Is that like where do you land? Let me give you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you got a business over here on the side that you're focusing on, that you're learning, man, if I focus on one thing, I'm going to just, start to scale this thing up, skyrocket it, whatever. Then here you have school, kind of 2 polar things. One's very new, the
Right.
fresh idea. One's like a different discipline. So what is your plan with school? Are you set on finishing? Is it dependent on if your business hits a number? Is it influenced by parents? Where do you stand kind of with school and having a business?
I think all of those 3 factors are valid, and I think that the main thing for me is like like I said, I'm a very long-term thinker. I don't like getting bogged down by the short term, and that's why I'm not very vulnerable to like the whole shiny object syndrome that I know a lot of people have issues with. So I think the school for me is like, look, I've always excelled in school since I was a kid, and that's hence why I was able to skip 2 years ahead. And I do see the potential in it. I see the value, and I know that if I'll be transferring for next fall. If I can transfer to a good school, I know that the connections there they do have value. Right, I know that the stuff I'm learning, it will have value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not like basically the only issue for me is figuring out like, okay, what's the ROI? Like, what am I paying? What am I gonna get in return? But I do feel like I know a lot of people will take away from the education system. They'll say it's broken and stuff like that. I agree with some aspects of it, but I do think, like I said, there is still value in certain areas, especially if you're able to excel and you're able to get into a top tier school. And for me, also the other factor is like I've already like skipped 2 years ahead. I'll get my bachelor's by 20. So while most people get it at 22 at
Yeah.
like usually like a lower tier school, and so I know that as long as I can squeeze all the opportunities out from whatever college I'm going to, I'll get some sort of return on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I like that. I think that my thing with school was that I knew I never was really good at it. I wasn't, and so I think my message is more like, if there's somebody like you that's actually like, hey, because you're speaking from your experience, which is like, okay, school's valuable, but you also
Right.
have like a business over here. So there is some part of your being that saw that opportunity as well. So I think it's cool what you're doing, because there's a lot of people that have that polarity of like, okay, look, I'm going to be in school, but yet I talk to these people, they're complaining.
Yeah.
They hate it. They're not organized. Because now that I'm a business owner, I'm like, if I went back to school, like I would look at it like a business,
Yeah.
and I think you're looking at life in that way with the lens of like, okay, how am I going to organize this? Where does my time go? How much time do I need for the clients? And I think that's really the main point, is that school will do you well, but if you're hiding in your room, if you're just partying, if you're not really squeezing out information and implementing it and making your life better, and you want to chase the business, it's like, go all in on that. But if you're like trying to fool yourself and into like, oh, well, this is going to be valuable, but you're not speaking to people, you're not introducing yourself,
Yeah.
you're not asking your professors questions and seeking for guidance. There's got to be another way because we all need that guidance. So I think that's interesting because there's a lot of people that are doing what we're doing, but they're just pretty all in on one side. But yeah, like you're gonna do well. You're doing well already, no matter what. And it's like you already have the thing, and it's like you go to school, you're gonna meet the dude that knows it, and you're gonna do ads for whatever. But I think that's a unique perspective, man, to be able to like balance that. And so do you which one do you put first? I guess I would say.
I think I put those two things equally. And
Equally.
I think that the reason why is because, again, I know that social media marketing at the end of the day, for me, it's a vehicle. Right? I know a lot of people who are very, very invested to it. And I'm not saying that I'm not invested. I just think that you have to be able to like pivot because, again, social media, yeah, it's been on fire. It's, for the past few years, it's gotten great results for businesses and whatnot. But I think that, moving forward, there are a lot of different avenues, like especially like in technology that you can explore, right? AI, like VR, AR, there's like so many different aspects of it. And there's going to be like sooner or later, there's going to be a next thing that kind of like trumps social media or not necessarily replaces it, but there's going to be the next big thing. So I want to be able to take that pivot if that comes in, right? And so I'm always, like I said, I'm the type of person to always think a few steps ahead, which is why I value school, because I know that, school can give me exposure to those things early on, right? So
And people, a lot of people, and when you're at a high end college, I mean, you're gonna. But I think most people they're not, and they don't even like it.
And that's the issue. That's the issue when the time that they're putting in outweighs the return. Like if you're going to a smaller college or a college with like fewer connections and opportunities, and you're putting in like hours and hours a week, and that's detracting from your business, that's when you gotta figure out like, hey, if I'm making 10, 15, 20 grand a month from my agency, then that might be a good time to just drop school completely because I'm not seeing any sort of return on it.
Yeah, but for someone like you, you're actually, just based on the vibe I get from you, you just seem structured. You seem like there's time blocks. This goes here, this goes there, and I think that's just the root, man. Is like some people just weren't taught how to think, and it's like their school life is just all over, and that once, my vehicle to really realize that was social media, building a team, seeing how I want to do personal brand, I want to have clients, I want to do, and so once I started to think in a way of like, how much time am I spending, because even in school stuff, like procrastination's huge, and that's not just because it's school, that's just life. And so if you're procrastinating doing paper and then you do it the last night and you're complaining, it's like that's gonna follow you wherever you go.
That's gonna affect your business performance as well.
Like just you can't. Well, maybe some people still do it that way. I feel like with business and other people on the end, it's a little more like, okay, I gotta do that. So that's, I mean, he's obviously doing really well. So what do you see kind of in the next few, like what do you see in the next 6 months for you? You're going to be kind of going into the, after that'll be another year of school, but what do you see, just where do you think your agency's going? You have, actually, rewind, you have students, right? So people that want to learn, what's a requirement, or what do you teach for students, and how do they find you if they want to,
So most of them come through my personal brand, and I make sure that there's an effort on my end to genuinely provide value to people. And it's across multiple platforms, right? So in the Facebook groups I'm in, I'll publicly answer people's questions. Like I'll leave a comment, I'll answer their questions, and I'll try to make sure it's like as in depth as possible. And then from that, I've kind of like built some sort of like small reputation for myself. So occasionally I'll get people asking about if I have like coaching consulting services from Facebook. I'll have people coming in through like my personal brand on Instagram. I had a few people through YouTube once, although I haven't really, like, admittedly, I haven't really focused on YouTube as much in the past few months.
Yeah.
But, you know, all of that, they just kind of come to me because like I said, I take the initiative to help people first. I don't think about the money or anything like that, especially not up front. And I just make sure I think to myself, like, what's the most, like, concise way that I can, like, deliver just, like, a ton of value to them and get their question answered and then some. And then I'll just get inquiries like coming in like all throughout my social media. So that's how most of my students come to me.
Just kind of just through, what you're radiating, just that the knowledge, the success, the discipline. People just are drawn to that. So, like with the student, and you said like a concise way to give them that value. I've seen kind of just video calls that just. So do you prepare for that with questions or metrics, or is it kind of based upon them? Because I definitely know that that's where I'm meant to be in some regards, and there's components to that too. You gotta like you have to prepare too, right? To do that, you can't just show up. Hey, what's your question? Like, there's thought and there's intention behind delivering somebody value, right?
Right. So, before I hop on a call, I make sure that they, schedule it through my like scheduler link.
So you just practical stuff, guys. This stuff's super valuable. It seems like it's not, but like Calendly, Acuity, because I knew he meant like, I'm like, what? So just so you guys know too, this is a huge thing if you're starting on. So that would be one thing I would do too. Whenever I'm on the call, I have my link open and I type it in for them. So I'm like, hey, I got their name in, I say, let's do tomorrow, and put their time. And so what he's talking about is he has an actual automated calendar system. A lot of people go back and forth between, hey, what time works? You want to do this time? Like, and so I see it even with people here, and I'm like, dude, like, it's weird because like, I'm 21 and there's people that are, 40, 50, they're like, hey, let's chat. And in my head, I'm like, dude, what does that mean? What's the intention? What's the time? Let me send you my link. And so he has a calendar automated system to where if somebody wants to coach, he's not, going back and forth, hey, this time. No, it's just they choose, he gets a reminder, they get a reminder. Right. And that's huge value to like, it's something so simple, but any type of anything like schedule stuff. So not to cut you off, but I love sharing that, like Calendly, Acuity scheduling. So they come in through there, they book that, and then
I make sure that I have like basically questions with drop down menus and like text boxes and stuff like that. They just fill
on
it
the
out.
Calendar.
Yeah, so I make sure that I know what I'm getting into beforehand, because oftentimes certain topics I'll have to prepare for sure. Like if they're talking about like, okay, on this call I have like, this is the client that I'm working with. Let's say it's a real estate agent or something like that. And then there's little nuances that I have to make sure that I pay attention to. Like, for example, if that real estate agent already has a personal brand, that's something I had to like take a mental note of as well, because if they have a personal brand, then we can leverage that, right? If she's like spending a ton of money on Zillow or whatever, then that's something I take into consideration, because then we can use that as a pain point to really play into, because she is wasting a lot of money. So little like notes like that really, really helps me go into the call prepared, because the worst thing that can happen is like you go into the call and they ask like a very specific question, and you're like, I can't come up with anything off the top of my head, and then the call just goes downhill from there, right? So I make sure that I'm prepared beforehand.
And even worse than that is when somebody calls you and you're figuring out why you called them on the call. Yeah. Like, hey, what's up, dude? And you're like, hey, man, like I'm just kind of going through this thing, and just like you're figuring it out on the fly.
And it's a time waster too. Like they're not getting as much value as they can out of those 60 minutes or 2 hours. Yeah.
Okay, so do you leave that open to people? Is that on your Instagram link, or so somebody goes in there? Is it planned out for like, or is it blocked off for like a week? Because if they can book today, how do you prepare? Do you know that there's certain days and you block it off?
Yeah, so I block off my calendar for that reason. And I think another thing that's very, very valuable for me is that I actually don't let people book a call with me right away. always make sure I give them at least 15 minutes of my time for a discovery call, because I want to know that they know what they're getting into. Because I've had several people who were very eager at first, and I actually decided to turn them down because I felt like they weren't ready for my services yet, right? Or they just weren't in the right frame of mind, or they're figuring stuff out. I wanted them to field test some stuff first. And so it's really important for me to actually hop on a Zoom call for at least 15, 20 minutes to figure out what exactly your problem is right now. Because there are certain things that I can help with. There are certain things that I can't. And I don't want to just be taking people's money and then, you know, obviously like their satisfaction goes down or whatever. So I want to make sure that I can actually give them maximum value.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, okay, guys. So if you want to, you know, check out his Instagram, his YouTube, and just kind of all that stuff, you can follow him. There's links everywhere. You know, you'll be able to find him. I definitely don't think this is gonna be the last.
No.
Yeah, we're gonna stay connected. So you'll be seeing more of him and I collaborating in different ways. Maybe it's bringing you guys value as specific questions if you have questions or whatever. But just kind of wanted to introduce you guys to somebody that's really leading the way. I mean, he's 17, skipped 2 years of high school, full-time student, has a social media marketing business, has coaching students. He's organized. He's got his own scheduler. He's not running around like a madman. So there's a lot to learn. And I think what's crazy is like you probably have students that are older than you know, and you're teaching them. But that's what the new world is being paved out to be, is that we have the ability to really share a lot of these efficiencies that we can use with technology. A scheduler is huge. I mean, it seems like it's not a big deal, but somebody wants to get in touch with you, if you just give them your time, like, hey, what's up? And you don't realize how much that stuff really costs you, you know? So check him out. I'm going to wrap it up here. But yeah, check him out and just kind of see what he's doing. He's probably so much in the doing, he's not posting a lot of different stuff, but that's a good sign. I notice, I'm like, man, I get the best results when I'm not posting. Like, so check him out there. Hopefully this brought you guys some value. And we'll probably be doing some more of these. So,
all right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Of course, man.